Welcome, dear listeners, to our discussion for tonight. I am your presenter and your brother in faith, Sydney Msonda. And in our discussion for tonight, we want to briefly look at the changes that have taken place in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in relation to fundamentals. So before me is this book YB 1889. YB 1889. That is Seventh-day Adventist yearbook. YB is yearbook, and it is a yearbook of the Seventh-day Adventists for 1889. What is so special about this book, the Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook of Statistics? Okay, when I turn to page 147 of this book, Seventh-day Adventist Yearbook of Statistics for 1889, I have a title there which reads Fundamental Principles of Seventh-day Adventists. Then it has the introductory part there. Then I scroll down. There's page 148. Then we have 149, 150, 151. Then it goes up to 151. Then we have the Roman numerals running from 1 all the way to 28. Okay, so what are these things that are indicated by Roman numerals running from 1 to 28? These are fundamental principles of Seventh-day Adventists. Now, to those who are Seventh-day Adventists and who are familiar with the teachings of the church today, does the church teach fundamental principles? The definite answer is no. The summary of the faith of Seventh-day Adventists today bears the title Fundamental Beliefs. So that shows that there is a change from fundamental principles to fundamental beliefs. Now, one might think that these changes maybe are just in terms of the title and not necessarily the contents of what is entitled fundamental beliefs. Okay, I do not have time here to draw a thorough difference between fundamental beliefs and fundamental principles, but I'll just ask you, after listening to this short presentation, to find the time, fetch for a book, Fundamental Beliefs, then read what it contains therein. Then you will realize the changes that are there. So, the introductory part of the fundamental principles of the Seventh-day Adventists for 1889 goes as follows. As elsewhere stated, Seventh-day Adventists have no creed but the Bible, but they hold to certain well-defined points of faith for which they feel prepared to give a reason to every man that asketh them. The following prepositions may be taken as a summary of the principal features of their religious faith, upon which there is, so far as we know, entire unanimity throughout the body. Okay, so they are telling us that they did not have creeds, but all they had was just the Bible. And this is not only depicted here, but it is also depicted in other portions of their writings. Hence they say, as elsewhere stated. That is not so much our area of interest. So we go forward. Then they go on to say, but they hold to certain well-defined points of faith. So these fundamental principles running from 1 to 28 are defined, well-defined points of faith, well-defined doctrinal points. And they are saying that they were prepared to explain to whoever may accuse them of believing something that was totally different from the rest of the denominations, totally different from the rest of the teachings of their time. Then they say, these which we are going to see, the propositions which can be taken as a summary of the principal features of what constituted their religious faith. Now, listen to what they say. They say, there was upon these teachings an entire unanimity throughout the body. That is to say, all the believers of then time believed just the same thing as one and the other. Okay, number one, that there is one God, a personal spiritual being, the creator of all things, omnipotent, omniscient, and eternal, infinite in wisdom, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth and mercy, unchangeable and everywhere present by his representative, the Holy Spirit. Okay, so this is the first fundamental principle, and it discusses who God is. They believed that God is one. Okay, and in his being one, he is a personal spiritual being. Look at what is stated in the fundamental beliefs. That is number 2. What does it say? That there is one God. Then they put the colons there and they say Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, a unity of 3 co-equal persons. Then they go on to describe how that one God, a composition of 3, is immortal, all-knowing, everywhere present, and so on and so forth. You see the change? That one is Trinitarian. This one was not. It was not Trinitarian in its setting, not Trinitarian in its teaching. So, when you get back to the fundamental principles, you will not find there in the teaching of the Trinity doctrine. But when you turn to the fundamental beliefs, therein you find the Trinity doctrine. Okay, so that's number one. And this is a question which we don't take seriously when it catches our ears. Mainly we just say, anyway, okay, yeah, oh, that is what it was. We never find the time to read for ourselves. We never find the time to sit down and think about what kind of a question that one might be. And the reason why we don't do so, to some, I think it's because we think that the church can never err. It cannot make a mistake. Hence, whatever it upholds today, we think and believe that to be the truth that God intended for us as a people. But we need to realize, brothers and sisters, that there is no smoke without fire. Those who say there have been changes, they mean what they say. And we should not give deaf ears to such claims and pay blind eyes to such questions. It's time to awake out of slumber. Look into questions of that kind. See what could be the truth pertaining to the same. Definitely, as you do that, you come to the knowledge of what has really transpired over the years. So there were no fundamental beliefs, but there were fundamental principles. Then those fundamental principles in regard to their teaching about who the God of the Bible is, they were non-Trinitarian, but the fundamental beliefs on the same teaching are proved to be Trinitarian. Actually, even the title itself reads the Godhead or Trinity. You see? That's it. Now, how did these fundamental principles come into existence? Well, the readings of the Spirit of Prophecy clearly indicates that God Himself revealed these teachings to them. They first appeared in the Signs of the Times of 4th June 1872 and again in the Review and Herald of 24th November 1872. But then they were 25. Then as we sift through history, we come to the year 1889. In the year 1889, we see these fundamental principles increased to 28. There were 3 others that were added. Just after that addition, God began to call our attention, then emphasize our attention or the attention of Seventh-day Adventists to these teachings, emphasizing that no change should be made to them. These were the truths He designed for us to lead us from 1844, when His people experienced the great disappointment, to the time when we shall enter the seat of God. Since then, our teachings were to be maintained as fundamental principles, beginning with number 1, which is a non-Trinitarian in its teaching about God and ending with number 28, which discusses the new heavens and the new earth. Now, as we enter the 1900s or the 20th century, we begin to see the warnings given to us through Sister White. These warnings clearly indicated that a change was going to happen in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, especially in relation to these fundamental principles. The arguments show that the church was going to shift from fundamental principles to something else. Hence, we see after the death of the pioneers, remember Ellen White herself died in 1915 on 16th July. Then in 1930, we see a new list of teachings which they called fundamental beliefs. That is when the title fundamental beliefs began. It was in 1930. Yes, that is when they were introduced, but they were not published then. Yes, but in the next year or in the following year, that was 1931, that was when they were produced in the church manual and in the yearbook of statistics of that very year. They were then 22, but in 1980, when the Seventh-day Adventist Church had a general conference session in Dallas, there in Texas, in the US, that is when they increased those 22 fundamental principles, fundamental beliefs, not fundamental principles, but fundamental beliefs, to 27. How? By adding 5 to those 22 of 1930. That is how they became 27. It was then in 1980 that the Seventh-day Adventist Church officially voted for the Trinity doctrine as part of its teachings. Since then, the Trinity doctrine has been established into the faith of Seventh-day Adventists. Then in 2015, during the leadership of Ted Wilson, the other one was included, and that is now what led to there being 28 as we see them today. So, the 1872 fundamental principles, which were increased to 28 by 1980 and remained 28 until 1930, were then in 1930 replaced by 22 fundamental beliefs, which were increased to 28 in 1980, to 27, not 28, but to 27 in 1980, and to 28 in 2015. So, this now became the exact fulfillment of all the predictions that Ellen White gave concerning these teachings. Now, I have just been talking without showing you what exactly I am talking about. So let me now turn to one historical source of the spirit of prophecy, where we find exactly what I am talking about. Let me open the Ellen G. White Writings app, then visit the Spirit of Prophecy books, specifically the selected messages. Here they